Well, my hope has to be that there will be within the North considerable soul searching and thought about where all of this leaves us and about how this particular British government has no real consideration for any of us in the north of Ireland. The fact is that the majority of the people of the north, by 56%, voted to remain in Europe. And I do believe that there are many people at grassroots level within unionism who are now looking at that and looking at how their best interests can be served in the future. And I think all of us know that our best interests are not going to be served by a hard Brexit. A Brexit of any description is a bad Brexit for all of the people of Ireland and will be as damaging to people on the Shankle Road in Ballymena and Portadown as it would be in Crossmaglen, Coal Island, Derry or Belfast. And we are challenging everybody in society to recognise that all of us in political life have a duty and a responsibility to stand up for people who feel discriminated against, whether it be Irish language activists, the LGBT community, ethnic minorities, and indeed others within our society. So we should feel very passionately about that. But it doesn't work because of the nature of our institutions unless we're able to forge agreements. And that means people crossing Rubicons, as we have crossed many Rubicons over the course of recent times, and recognise that their responsibility isn't just to the unions or the loyalists of the North, but their responsibility is to everybody, just as I feel my responsibilities very dearly are to the Republicans, the Nationalists, the unions and the loyalists, the ethnic minorities, the LGBT community, Irish language activists, and indeed many more. And even though some people might have been impatient with me in terms of coming to the decisions that I came to, I thought that it was very, very important that I'd done everything in my power over whatever period to try and maintain the institution, but also just as importantly to try to convince the British government and the unions that there needed to be a sea change in their attitude. And remember, the British government have contributions to make to all of this. They have not fulfilled the commitments that they made in the Good Friday Agreement. So I do accept that there were many people who were probably agitated that I didn't move quicker. But I'm a patient man. I've been around negotiations for a very, very long time. And I thought I had a duty and a responsibility to show everybody that I was trying my best to make the process work. Well, I was very proud of the people of Derry and the way that they stood up in the civil rights protests and confronted the RUC. And of course, the biggest event that happened in Derry was the murder of 14 people on Bloody Sunday. But what were those people marching for? They were marching against internment. They were standing up for the rights of their fellow citizens, and they were shot to death by the British Army. And it was a terrible, terrible event, probably the worst event in the city in centuries. And there's been much analysis about all of that, about innocent civil rights protesters have been killed. But it's really what they were protesting about. And I'm proud that they were prepared to stand up because they were showing a spirit that was making it clear to the British government and the unions, misrulers in Stormont that they wanted real change. And of course, we've had conflict which went on for many, many years, but I think the fact that we were able to break and we were in the lead of it because it was a unilateral decision on foot of Gerry Adams and myself asking the IRA to call a ceasefire in 1994. The fact that they had the courage to do that and to effectively say to the political process, including what they seen as a critical element of that, us as a Republican leadership, that they're up for trying to make the peace process work, but just as importantly, a meaningful process of negotiations. So to be involved in the Good Friday negotiations as I was, the St. negotiations, which brought the DUP into government. I mean, I remember going with Derry to Downing Street, and we were sitting in a small sitting room with Jonathan Powell and Tony Blair. It was just after Sinn Féin and the DUP became the largest parties in the north, and Tony Blair was at the point of despair. And he started talking, and he talked about, this was not a good result, that David Trimble had lost the election, that his strategy was going to be to try and get David Trimble back into pole position. So it was about 7 minutes into talking to Jerry and myself, and I said, hold on a minute, Tony. That's not going to happen. My opinion, the DUP are going to be the largest party within unionism for a foreseeable future. What we have to do is get the DUP into government. And I remember his words. But Sir Martin, Ian Paisley will never share power with Sinn Féin. And I said, I don't accept that. I said, if we work at this, if we're smart about how we deal with this, that I do believe we can bring about circumstances which will see that happen. My mother was a Donegal woman, and she came into Derry in her late teens to work in the shirt factories, and she couldn't cross the border unless she had to produce an authorisation document. That's how bad things were way back in the 1940s. So I think that she obviously witnessed an enormous change. She was in Derry for over 60 years, and we lived in Elmwood Street, and we could step out our front door and we could look through the gap in the houses in Cable Street, and we could see Derry walls, which for many decades, centuries, was a bastion of unionism. And I got a terrible shock when she told me she had never been in Derry walls, until one day that we took her up at the request of Help the Aged, who wanted a photograph of myself and my children, my grandchildren, and my mother. And she never even said whenever we took her up. She was in her 80s at the time, and she was walking down at the end of it between John Harrison, God rest him, great photographer from Belfast, who wanted to take the photo on Derry walls. So he was the reason we were in Derry walls. And she said, to the two of us, this is the first time I've been in Derry walls. And that was, psychologically, the walls belonged to somebody else. Whereas I believe if the Stones could speak, they would say they belong to all of us. So I regularly walk the Derry walls, mostly at night time in the dark with a dog, and there's nobody else there but the two of us. And I do it thinking of her. But for her to see her son be involved in these negotiations and become education minister, and God rest her, it was wonderful that she was able to be there on the day that Ian Paisley and myself walked down the steps of Stirling together, and to be there with my wife and with my children. It was a great moment for her. Well, I think we obviously have to get things right in the north and between north and south. I think the British government they need to grow up, need to smell the coffee in relation to the relationships that exist, and they need to make their contribution. And you really can't make a contribution by kowtowing to attitudes which are about discriminating against people. So what I see as the future for Sive, I would love to see Sive living in a free Ireland, in a united Ireland, and I think that it's eminently possible that we can achieve that. We in Sinn Féin are very determined and very dedicated to do that. As someone who has died in Lowell, Irish Republican, I passionately want to see the reunification of my country, and I want to see all of our children, including the children of Unionists on the Shankill Road and Loyalists on the Shankill Road, grew up in a country which is respectful of them and is prepared to develop an economy and prosperity for them in a way that sees politicians who have a responsibility, in particular for them, have control of their own affairs. And I can't see how we can ever do that while we are linked to what I consider to be a very backward looking British government.